The New York Jets have finally pulled the plug on Zach Wilson. What does that mean? Coming up next. So I'm taping this on Monday around 7:30. So the news is out. Zach Wilson has officially been benched for Friday's game for the New York Jets, and Tim Boyle, who played a little bit yesterday versus the Buffalo Bills, will get the start on Friday. This was a decision that I think we saw coming after he was benched yesterday. We were wondering if they were going to do it, and they finally have done it for Tim Boyle. And I think before Jets fans kind of get carried away with, oh, Tim Boyle executed some passes yesterday, had a higher grade than Zach Wilson did. He also threw an interception at the end as well against a Buffalo Bills defense that was probably slacking just a little bit, knowing that the score was over. For me, how bad is Tim Boyle that they were willing to deal with Zach Wilson for this amount of time? And there's so many questions that come into this, but the blame has to be put on Joe Douglas. A lot of people get on Robert Saleh's case for believing in him, babying him, whatever. This is Joe Douglas. Why is this Joe Douglas? He clearly wanted to justify this Zach Wilson pick. He clearly did. There's no other reason. After the horrible season last year and how it ended with Zach Wilson, it was clear he wasn't ready and clearly not able to deal with being the quarterback for the New York Jets. This is the third season of Zach Wilson. No one could have anticipated the severity of Aaron Rodgers' injury at the beginning of the season. But what you could have predicted was that given his age, he was probably going to miss a game or two. Maybe if, like I said, his age. But you still had Zach Wilson at the backup. And I can justifiably understand that decision making. I can understand that decision making from Joe Douglas. It's like, okay, we still believe he has a lot of potential. We feel we should have drafted him at that high in the draft. Rocky start for sure, but he's going to learn under Aaron Rodgers. We'll keep him as a backup, just to come in every once in a while with Rodgers if he goes down for a second. Disastrous injury. So now Zach Wilson, with how much teaching at that point, which, let's face it, I didn't really believe he was going to learn that much from Aaron Rodgers. Well, Zach Wilson comes in, again, not really competing for the job. And because Aaron Rodgers was the clear-cut quarterback in the offseason. Not really competing for the job. He's thrown in, but they get a win versus the Bills. But basically, every single game has been a rock fight from the Jets. And what I can't stand is watching this offense play with him. Now, I get it. There's other flaws. There's the offensive line. There's Nate Hackett's play calling, for sure. These are not perfect. They don't really have a target other than Garrett Wilson. And their running game other than Breece Hall is bad. So, what does that mean? Is it all on Zach Wilson? Here's what I do know. I know Joshua Dobbs would have made it better. How come Joe Douglas didn't trade for Joshua Dobbs? Look how the Vikings are doing. That was an easy move that could have been made, and it wasn't. So even if your backup quarterback situation, so for example, even if you still wanted to go with Zach Wilson to start for the rest of the season, where it's like, Zach's our guy. What if Zach gets hurt? Then you're really screwed. Why not trade for Joshua Dobbs as a rental for the season, just in case? Even with your delusional thinking that Zach Wilson's going to be the quarterback this year, why not have Dobbs just there? Now, we all know Dobbs would be starting over Zach Wilson if he was here, but why not at least try? Now, I'm going to watch Friday's game and pay really close attention to how well the defense plays, and with newfound energy, maybe the targets and O-line is better. Who knows? Because there's a lot of time where this O-line gets canned and Zach Wilson just holds on to the ball too. So the O-line is getting criticized for Zach Wilson's inept ability to play the quarterback position. Now, I'm not defending the O-line necessarily because they aren't very good, but there's no doubt about it that they get ripped on sometimes for Zach Wilson's mistakes. Now, we're going to see on Friday, there's really not much to discuss about the game versus the Bills. You knew this was it. This was a win they needed to have, especially, and also the Chargers, with Staley's stupid quotes after yesterday's game, they should be embarrassed by that loss versus the Chargers. I know the Raiders have found newfound energy, but they should have beaten the Raiders in Vegas. But their offense is just so bad. So bad. Now, you hope Tim Boyle or Trevor Siemian, obviously Tim Boyle starting on Friday. We don't know who the backup situation is. I don't know if it's Zach Wilson. I don't know if it's Trevor Siemian. I don't know if they're done with Zach Wilson. But here's what I do know. They should be done with Zach Wilson. Yesterday should have been the final game New York Jets fans saw of Zach Wilson. It's time to move on. It's time for, I heard talk about him possibly being released. I wouldn't rule that out at all. He probably should be released and go to another situation, have a fresh start, be a backup somewhere else, compete for a spot in the offseason, get a fresh start somewhere else. That's what should happen for Zach Wilson, because this is not the place for him. It just hasn't been. You could say you feel bad for the kid. You try to be nice to the kid. Well, I think they've been nice long enough, because what I do know is if any other player on the New York Jets played as poorly at their position as Zach Wilson does at quarterback, I know the quarterback position, very different, very difficult. A lot of football games are relied on the quality of play from the quarterback. But what I do know is this: the players on the New York Jets clearly weren't having it with Zach Wilson. There was that small chance that they might have after his bounce back game, after that terrible New England loss in Kansas City, where they were like, okay, I see you. He took accountability for the loss. He hasn't really said anything stupid this year. So from that, I'll give him some credit. But he has not grown as a player. He just hasn't. This year is just as bad as last year's. So with Zach Wilson, it was time. And the New York Jets are people are calling it the season's over. If I was a Jets fan, I'd be looking at it and I'd be like, wow. Or if I was a Jet hater or something, I'd be like, geez, man. After that Eagles game, I was feeling so good. Even after that Giants game, I was feeling good. We had an opportunity to capitalize going into the Bills, and 3 straight losses. Wow, things can change, especially when you have a terrible quarterback and you can't score. Is Tim Boyle going to be better? No, I don't think he's going to be that much better. I really don't, because why else would they stick with Zach Wilson? I guess you can make the argument that Joe Douglas is just in Salah's ear and he's just trying to say, hey, keep starting Zach Wilson. And that very well could be the case, knowing that he easily could have traded for Joshua Dobbs and it didn't happen. So that very well could be a possibility. But we're going to see on Friday. Tim Boyle has to go. I think it'll be at least interesting to see what happens. But Zach Wilson, I think, just played his last game as a New York Jet. It's really that simple. There's not much else to really discuss about yesterday's game. You knew the game was pretty much over after the fumble on the first play. Because then it's like, once the game got to 22 points, I believe, for the Bills, you knew it was over. You knew the Jets weren't getting that many points on the board. You knew it. You knew even how good the defense was. You just knew it wasn't going to happen. The Jets made a change that needed to happen. It was too late for the opinion of many, but it's here. They're moving on from Zach Wilson. It's over. They'll probably draft a quarterback in the offseason, even if Rodgers may not be thrilled with it. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers in December. The Jets will have to get to at least minimum, because they're 4-6 right now. They'll have to get to 500 in order to even maybe think about Aaron Rodgers coming back this season. Because I don't think he comes back if the team is under 500 by the time he's there. It just won't happen. Very interesting news day for the New York Jets.